Today we're going to take what we learned about conditional statements and we're going to use it to make what's called a logical argument. Basically, we're going to use logic. So here's what I mean by logic. We're going to take some if-then statements and we're going to talk about how we can connect them to turn it into an argument. So as an example, let's take a look at these two statements here. Let's say I told you, number one, if I go out tonight, then I'm going to go to the movies. And we say, okay, well, that's a perfectly logical statement. That makes sense. And then in statement two, I said, if I go to the movies tonight, I'm going to go see Tenet. All right, again, that makes sense. Well, what's special about this situation is if you look at it, the first logical statement, the first if-then statement ends where the second one starts. And that's what we want to talk about today. We want to talk about looking at different if-then statements that can be connected because one of them ends where the next one starts. So basically what we're going to do, we're going to make a chain. Instead of having two separate statements, we're going to connect them and make one statement. And I said in the notes, the reason we can do that is because the second one starts where the first one ends. So basically, if I make a chain, I can go from step one, if I go out tonight, then step two, I'll go to the movies. And then if I go to the movies, then I'll go see Tenet. Now the question becomes, do I even need this middle part? Wouldn't it be easier to just cut that part out and say, if I go out tonight, then I'm going to go see Tenet? It's a true statement. We've just connected two. We've kind of cut out the middle part and connected the beginning to the end. All right, so that's an important concept of making a logical argument. There's a fancy name for it. It's called the law of syllogism. Now, I don't need you guys to know that name. I don't need you to memorize it. I'm not going to ever ask you on a test, what's that law called where I just need you to know the concept. It's a very important concept. So instead of calling it the law of syllogism, I usually just call it an if-then chain, because that's what we're doing. We are chaining together if-then statements. So here's the rule. You can chain together as many statements as you want. You can do two statements like we just did, a simple one, or you could chain together 3 or 4 or 10 or 100. You can chain as many as you want as long as these things happen. Number one, each then has to match the if of the next statement. That's what chains them together. As long as the then part turns into the if part of the next one, we can just stick them together. And number two, each of those if-then statements has to be true. So it doesn't help if you stick a false statement in there. Each statement also has to be true. So if you take a whole bunch of true statements and each then becomes the if of the next one, you get this really long chain, and what you can do is you can cut out all the middle stuff. That's what the law of syllogism says. If you make this if-then chain, doesn't matter how long, it doesn't matter if it's two statements like the one we did, or 100 statements, a list 100 statements long, if each then matches the next if, and if all the statements are true, you can cut out all the middle stuff and jump straight from the very beginning of the first one to the conclusion or the then part of the last one.